Mr. President, when the history books are written about those who fought hardest against poverty, who stood up for those with no voice, with very little power, in an increasingly unfair economy, LBJ and his war on poverty will be a few chapters in that book, but Senator Tom Harkin will occupy a pretty big place in that story as well. And I salute him for coming down and spending the time to talk about this long fight on poverty that this country has waged until it needs to wage, and salute the role that he has played as just an inspiration to many of us who have sought this office to try to stand in his shoes and in his place. Mr. President, I want to talk about the same subject because over the holidays, I had the chance to spend a day in New Haven, Connecticut with a 40-year-old homeless man who up until last spring had been employed for the better part of the last 20 years. But as has happened to millions of Americans over the last several years, this man, who I'll call for today's purposes Nick, lost his job. Now, Nick's had it tough his whole life. His father was a drug addict who got Nick addicted to crack when he was 13 years old. He was born into a cycle of drug use and violence and poverty that's far too prevalent in places like New Haven and Bridgeport and cities across this country. But despite the odds that were stacked against him, Nick graduated from high school. He built a career for himself around sales. And now, after 20 years of working and 40 years of fighting the odds, Nick, for the first time in his life, is homeless. And so I spent the day with Nick, seeking shelter from the cold, using the public library to apply for jobs, attending meetings that have helped keep him clean and sober. And aside from receiving the support that he needs for his health issues, Nick spent most of that day just looking for work. He wants to work. He desperately wants to get back on the job, and he's hopeful that one day he'll find work soon. But he is caught right now in this vicious downward spiral of homelessness. He can't find a job without a home. He fills out dozens of job applications, but with his address being a homeless shelter, he doesn't compete very well with other applicants. But of course, as Nick tells it, how can he get a home without a job? He's caught, he's stuck, like millions of other Americans. Now, one of the things that keeps Nick from starving, other than the food and the shelter that he gets from Columbus House and the local soup kitchen, is the $100 he has gotten, or used to get up until last week, in unemployment insurance. Without that measly $100 a week, things get pretty dire right now as we speak for Nick. But the fact is, unemployment benefits make homelessness a little bit more manageable for a guy like Nick. These emergency funds are often the only thing that are standing between a family where their primary breadwinner is out of work and a life on the streets. It's during a long stretch of unemployment where these meager benefits become the only way that a family can continue to pay the mortgage, and the only way that a young guy can continue to keep up with the rent. If we don't restore unemployment benefits now, tens of thousands more people will be living on the streets. That's not hyperbole, that's reality. And they will be then captured in that same catch-22 of homelessness. No job without a home, no home without a job. Now, like Nick, there are 28 million Americans who have needed emergency unemployment compensation since 2008. These Americans aren't some distant, unfamiliar group of people. You know them. They're our friends. They're our neighbors. They're people who have worked their entire lives and who want to get back to work again. I recently sat down with about a half dozen long-term unemployed individuals in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and you see the pain and the agony on their faces as they recount their daily, hours-long quest to find work, applying to hundreds of jobs, making dozens of phone calls, and coming up empty. There's something almost dehumanizing about that effort to seek work, to prove your worth, and to come up empty time after time again. One guy I met, Ronnie, he's sat behind a desk his entire career, worked his entire life in a white-collar job, and he just said that he would take any job. He would sweep floors, to do anything just to get back to work. He's not lazy. He's not gaming the system. He's just one of millions who would rather do any job at all than be unemployed. You know, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they say that they're opposed to extending unemployment benefits because they want to get back to normal with regard to unemployment insurance. But that reasoning just totally ignores the reality of this recession. Unlike the recessions in 1982 and 1991 and 2001, the unemployment rate has not fallen after the end of the recession with respect to people who are long-term unemployed. The rate of those that are unemployed for more than 26 weeks is at the highest today that it has been in 60 years. There are now 3 unemployed workers for every 1 job opening, compared to 2 or fewer workers per job opening in the wake of previous recessions. This just isn't a normal recession. There are more people out of work for longer periods of time than at any time in most of our lives. Now, if you're in the top 10% of earners prior to this recession, things are pretty much back to normal for you. In 2012, the top 10% of earners took about half of all income home in the United States. Let's say that again, 10% of income earners took home half of all the income earned in this country. And guess what? Those people have recovered. And during that time, corporate profits are also at an all-time high. So for those people and for those entities, things are back to normal. And maybe that's why some Republicans think that it's right to bring unemployment insurance back to pre-recession norms. But it's not. One of the hallmarks of this abnormal recession is the amount of people who become unemployed and stay unemployed. 43% of the unemployed people in Connecticut are long-term unemployed. 43% of the people in Connecticut who don't have a job have been out of a job for months and years. Rebecca, who lives in Connecticut, emailed my office and she said, I'm 34 years old. For the first time since I was 16, I'm unemployed. I'm an attorney, and I apply to 20 to 40 jobs per week. Another woman wrote my office, my husband has been out of work for 52 weeks. He spent 30 plus years in banking. His last position was as regional director of retirement services, and now 52 weeks without a job. Frank from Meriden writes, I've worked all my life, 43 years. I was laid off in 2009 and again in 2013. In both instances, I dedicated my unemployed time searching to secure a job. I'd prefer to work as long as I'm capable. And with your assistance in extending the EUC program, I may at least have a fighting chance of securing employment. He says, please afford me the opportunity to continue the employment search without the added burden of discontinued benefits. But we shouldn't only extend benefits because it's the right thing to do. It's also the economically smart thing to do. The Congressional Budget Office tells us that 200,000 jobs are going to be lost this year if we don't restore emergency unemployment benefits. In the week since unemployment benefits lapsed, $400 million has been drained from states' economies. You see, when we give people support during their time of need when they're out of work, they spend that money, and they spend it quickly. Extending unemployment benefits offers the best bang for the buck that you can offer our economy. Every dollar that we put into UI returns as much as $1.90 to the economy. CBO says that by extending unemployment benefits through 2014, we'll boost the GDP of this nation by 0.2%. One action of this Congress can boost GDP by 0.2%. Now, no matter what we do, it is still going to be a long road back for those who have been unemployed for a year or more, who are going to face discrimination based on their age or based simply on the fact that they've been unemployed for a long period of time. Just giving them benefits doesn't magically put them back to work. But the most remarkable thing that you find when you talk to these individuals is that while they are frustrated, their spirit isn't broken. Every time somebody sheds a tear to me recounting their ordeal of unemployment, their story always ends with a hopefulness that employment is just around the corner. And Nick is that kind of guy too. He knows that things are going to get better for him. But as we walked around New Haven in the cold for 10 hours last week, we talked virtually the entire time, he wondered whether anybody down here really cared about the dehumanizing existence of being without a job and being without a home. He wondered why Congress would turn their backs on him and the millions of others who have been clobbered by the worst recession in our lifetime. I've kept in touch with Nick in the days since I spent the day with him, and just yesterday he sent me an email. He said, "I'm sitting right now in the Department of Labor office updating my resume. Chris, I've not had any luck yet with employment, but I will keep trudging, just as I'm doing in pretty much every aspect of my life. I know it will get better as I continue to strengthen my faith and stay on a straight and narrow path. As long as I continue to do those two things, the sky is the limit for me, Chris." Nick believes that things are going to get better for him. Millions of other Americans who have been out of work for 50, 100 weeks still believe that salvation is around the corner. All they ask is that we extend some modicum of support to them so that they can make that winnowing dream a reality. I yield the floor.